Welcome back to another episode of the Sell Like a Leader podcast, the podcast for revenue leaders who are on a mission to cultivate a high-performing sales organization. I'm your host, David Kreiger, founder of Sales Roads, America's most trusted sales outsourcing and appointment setting firm. And I have an awesome guest here today. Who really needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. John Barrows. And I actually got the opportunity to meet John about 2 years ago. We were down in South America at a conference and I got to hear him speak. I'd always heard him on LinkedIn. He has great insights. He just tells it like it is, and just such a dynamic sales leader that wanted to come back and eventually have him on the show. And I had a topic that I really wanted to dive into. So I thought it was an opportune time. So John, thanks so much for being here and taking the time to chat with me.
Thanks for having me on, David. Appreciate it.
So your speech 2 years ago stood out to me. It was about AI. It was right around when ChatGPT was coming out. And I think we all were excited, surprised, scared. And I'm not sure if that much has changed since then, maybe similar emotions. You know, the big thing that stood out was you gave me a book that you wrote. And I've got it here. You actually even filled it out for my two kids, Jonah and Ari. And I just love that. And the book is I Want to Be in Sales When I Grow Up. And I think it's, I want to hear from you. One of the things that it stuck out with me is I think a lot of times kids want to be firemen. They want to, be doctors. They want to be lawyers. They want to be entrepreneurs, but they don't necessarily ever say sales people. So I think you kind of encapsulated that in the book. And so can you tell me a little bit about why you wrote the book, how it came to be, and give our listeners a little bit of an overview?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So it was, first of all, before COVID, I was traveling. My daughter was born in 2010 and I was traveling all over the world and I was a weekend dad. I always committed to never traveling on the weekends, but I would pretty much leave almost every Monday and come home every Friday, which obviously sucks, right? As a dad who wants to be around, but couldn't figure out a way to get myself off of an airplane. And so I'm always looking for ways to connect with my daughter and help her understand a little bit about what I did. So why I was traveling and what I was doing. And, it's funny to your point, kids know what a doctor is, a lawyer is, a firefighter, right? They see it on TV. But when you tell your kid you're in sales, they look at you sideways. What do you mean by that? It's like, you just talk to people all day long. It's like, well, yes, and right. How do I figure out a way to do something and connect with my daughter? Around the same time, and for years, people have been telling me, like, when are you going to write a book? When are you going to write a book? I drank my way through 4 years of college. I probably read about 10 books in my life. And so that's just not the way I learn. I learn by having conversations and stuff. So I figured I'd be a little bit of a hypocrite to write a book. And plus, what am I going to write about sales that hasn't already been written a billion times before? So, I was struggling with that. And then she was 6 and she came to me and she had started with the Girl Scouts. And she comes to me and she goes, Daddy, I have this link here, right? I got to sell Girl Scout cookies. I have this link here that people can buy Girl Scouts cookies from me. And I know you have a big social media following. So would you mind sharing this out to your network? And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. And she's like, why not? I was like, A, that's my network. And I built my ass off to get it there. And B, why would they buy from you over anybody else? Every other kid's asking, whatever. So she's, what do I need to do? I'm like, you need to give me your pitch, right? So we practiced a little bit and then she put on a wig. You can actually go to iwanttobeInSalesWhenIGrowUp.com and you can see this whole thing. And she was like, I like the laminades and this is why there's sweet taste in my mouth and all this stuff. So that she did an adorable little video. I then write a blog post about it and it blows up, obviously, and she becomes the number one seller in the town. And then the following year, we were going door to door, right? And mind you, Girl Scout cookies go on sale in February. We live in Boston. February in Boston is about as bad as it gets, okay? And so we're going door to door, which I think is a really healthy thing for a kid to do, right? Like, I think door to door sales is the most purest form of sales you can get, right? Getting doors literally slammed in your face in 5-degree weather. So we practice objection handling. And all that came together of me being like, this is a really good way for me to relate to my daughter, help her do something that she's interested in, help her get a sense of what sales really is and how it's not just tricking people into, that type of stuff. And this feels like a book that I can make a difference with because, to your point, no kid ever says, I want to be in sales when I grow up. And we are the default profession. I think there's about 200 colleges or universities in the United States right now that you can actually get your degree in sales, but that's just recent. And so all of us go to school to think wherever we want to be when we grow up at 18 years old, which I think is ridiculous to ask a kid to do. And then they get out into the real world and they're like, oh, I don't want to do this. And because sales is a low barrier to entry and you don't really need a degree for it, you get into it. But because it's such a hard profession, 3 out of 4 people that get into it every single year get out because it's that hard. And my take is if you thought about it early as a real profession and you studied it and you learned the psychology and all that other stuff, to me, it's one of the greatest professions in the world when done right. One of the worst when done wrong, but one of the best when done right. Because not only it's not about people talk about sales ice to an Eskimo. Like those are the worst sales reps, in my opinion. Those are the sleazy, gross ones that we all look at and go, ugh. Sales isn't about convincing anybody of anything. It's about helping people solve problems or achieve goals. So it's I think one of the most rewarding professions there is out there because when you can see the difference that you make when you introduce a new solution to a client, it actually makes a difference. It makes a world of difference. So it's one of the most rewarding. But if your industry is tech or whatever it is, and AI all of a sudden just erases the need for that, you can take your sales skills and go apply them to something else and you can adapt. The more effort you put in, typically, the more you get paid. So for like women, disadvantaged people, or people who aren't white males like me and get all the advantages out there, it gives them an opportunity to break out of 9 to 5, the hourly rate scenarios. Cause if they learn how to do it, they can do it. And it's just for me, it's really important skill to have, right? Because everything to me is sales. You go for an interview, you're selling yourself. You got an idea that you want to pitch upstream to get a promotion, you got to sell it. My dad was an engineer, and he always thought that his work should speak for itself because it was so good. And it was. He was a genius. He was literally a genius. But he just always hit the ceiling. And he always got so frustrated because other people who were not nearly as talented as him knew how to work things, the game and relationships and all this other stuff and would get promoted and everything over him. And he would just always be so frustrated. And I noticed that. And I was like, Dad, you gotta tell people about it. Like you can't just do it. You gotta tell people about it. And I look at business and I say, I've rarely seen a business fail because of product market fit, the product didn't work, whatever it is, right? I see tons of businesses fail because they can't sell it.
Yeah. That's awesome, John. And there's a lot in that. So a few things. One, I think you're right. It's a ubiquitous problem, if you want to call it that. There's not schooling around sales, and I'll break it down in a few different ways. First of all, that means that there are more bad salespeople, like you said, because people don't know. They see the images on TV as to what is good sales, and we know those images in those movies are exactly what bad sales is, right? And when I got my MBA, there was one sales class and it was for sales management. And when I look at the people from my MBA class who are most financially successful, they're the best salespeople. They are, the people who went into investment banking, the ones who stay in it and make the most money are the ones who know how to sell deals in investment. They're not necessarily the best modelers doing Excel. They're the best sales goes for attorneys, right? The partners are the ones who bring in the business, not necessarily the ones who are the best in the courtroom. And and you can say that's unfortunate or fortunate. But sales is such an important skill, and I think there's now a movement for a course on financial literacy in high school, which I think is really important. But I also think, to your point, having a half unit class on sales, because it's not just a profession, it is a way of interacting with people that you meet every day. And when you can do it right and you approach it with the right type of prism, like you said, that it's not about a zero sum game and me selling ice. An Eskimo doesn't need ice, it's about understanding people's needs. I love how you encapsulated it in a book, and love how you took not the route of having the book for salespeople, but for future salespeople, which is in many ways more important. So, with that, were there any specific things that you feel like both either through the process that you guys got to learn together that she took away, and important life lessons that you feel are important for both her or other folks as they think about sales and learning sales, whether it's selling Girl Scout cookies or whatever they're doing as kids?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to hit a lot of those, and I think the back summarizes the 5 or 6 key takeaways about how ultimately sales isn't just about making money. Do you make money? Absolutely, if you do it right. It's about helping people solve problems and achieve goals. If you lead with that, money, like effectively, if you lead with value, money tends to follow, right? But if you start with trying to make money and you don't have value, the money ain't going to be there. And that's always, I love business owners who start a business with the idea of selling it to XYZ company. It's wait, you're already thinking about selling this company? So are you building this because you're passionate about solving a problem, or are you doing this to exit at a high level? The people that go into like exit at a high level type of thing rarely get there, because entrepreneurship is not for the weak, right? If you are not insanely passionate about the problem you are trying to solve, you won't last. Like I think the failure rate of startups is something like 90 something percent after 5 years, right? Just because people don't have the drive to stay with it or the passion to stay with it, because it's such a fucking hard, brutal slug, right? Sales is entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is sales in a lot of ways. There was a piece about timing in there, about making sure that you're going where the fish are, if you will. You know what I mean? Like she went before dinner time, when she was going knocking on doors, and everybody was like, no, we're actually at dinner. Thanks, but come back later. So next time she went back out after dinner, right? With dessert time for cookies. One of them was she sold cookies with nuts in them, and some kid had a nut allergy. And so she felt bad about it, and because that kid couldn't have the cookies, because she saw the kid's face and he was disappointed that he couldn't have them because they had nuts in them. So she went home and just baked non-nut cookies and brought them back to the kid later and just gave them to him instead of trying to sell them to him, because she felt bad, and made the kid happy, and then got a bunch of referrals, obviously, of other kids in the neighborhood. So I think all of it, and I think that's it. I think probably the biggest one is the realization of, my opinion, what sales is. And that's the first part, which is, she goes and she's at school, and they have to pick a profession out of the hat to write a report on, and kids get lawyer, doctor, and all this, and she gets sales, and she's bummed about it because she doesn't even know what it is, right? And so she comes home, and I'm like, what's wrong? And she's, I'm gonna do this project, and I gotta do something about sales, and I don't even know what it is. And I was like, let's think about it here for a second. And in the book, I'm holding like a butter dish, right? And I'm like, so here's sales isn't about what you see on TV. See this butter dish right here? Somebody had to sell somebody the materials so that they could make this butter dish, right? So whoever made this butter dish had to go get materials, and whoever that was had to effectively sell them. Then that person who made that butter dish had to then sell it to the store so it could be on the shelves, right? That store sold it to us, so that we're now holding a butter dish with butter in it, as opposed to holding butter in our hand and being all messy. So that, when you start to reframe sales in that, it to me, it's everything. Literally everything is about sales. And I don't mean the sleazy part of it that everybody else thinks, the movies. People ask me all the time, John, what are the best sales movies, right? And it's, oh, Glengarry Glen Ross, Wolf of Wall Street, Boiler Room. Wrong. Those are the worst sales movies I've ever seen in my life. Don't get me wrong, they're funny movies, they're hysterical, but they're the worst sales movies. It's everything that's wrong about this profession. Like, they're just trying to screw people out of money. They don't give a shit about what they're selling, any of that stuff, right? The best sales movies, my opinion, the two best are, the second best sales movie is a little rough to watch, which is why you have to watch my favorite one after that. But the second best sales movie is Pursuit of Happiness, right? With Will Smith. And because he's selling bone density scanners and just grinding and trying to, and saving 7 seconds of cold calls so that he could go home and have his kid at the shelter center. But it's rough because it's brutal for 95% of the movie. And then finally at the end, you're like, oh my God, thank God he did it, right? So that's why you have to watch my favorite sales movie, which is Tommy Boy. And Tommy Boy to me is the essence of sales. Because I always talk about, there's this moment in sales that every sales rep wakes up, and I call catching your sales groove, right? Where you just kind of wake up one day, and it's just a little bit easier today than it was yesterday. And there's not like a defined moment. It just tends to happen. When that happens, it's when you stop pitching your solutions and you start having conversations about your solutions, right? You stop caring about your commission check. You start caring more about the client's needs than you do about your commission check. And oddly enough, that's when your commission check goes through the roof, right? And there's this beautiful scene in Tommy Boy when he catches his sales groove, right? Which is, Helen, you look like a Helen. Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman, right? The point on that is, like, that to me is the essence. He was doing it for the purest of reasons, right? He was trying to save his town. He was trying to save the plant, keep his dad's legacy going. He knew he had great parts, knew he had a great product, and then transfer that enthusiasm over to these people, but stopped trying, stopped reading the scripts, stopped like going through the sequences and the cadences and all that crap that we're all doing today, which I think is just criminal. I've been somebody who's always said that sales is an art and a science, obviously. And I actually lean more towards the science than the art, because I think the science lays the foundation, the structure, the process that we put in place. But I think over the past 10, 15 years, we have way over science sales. And I think we've completely lost the art. We've over manufactured everything. There's a sequence, there's a conversion, there's a this, there's a that. I have to get them through this stage of the sales process. And then we have to show them this demo, and then we have to do this. And it's such a robotic thing. And the sad part is is that we've turned a lot of reps into robots. And guess what? Now they're getting replaced by robots.
Yeah, and that is what I really wanna dive into with you because I think it's on everyone's mind. I've been thinking about it with my kids a lot
Mhm.
because they talk about what they wanna be, and my kids wanna
Yeah.
be right now an engineer and an architect. I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome," and then I break it down and I'm like, all these things are potentially replaceable by AI, at least in the current manifestation.
Not potentially. They are replaceable.
All right. Well, let's dive into it. With that perspective, since you feel that they are replaceable, what is the advice you're giving, or how are you guiding Charlotte through this? What is your perspective on what kids should be doing right now as they, at least a few years before they go and have to be full time in the work world? How are you maneuvering through this as a father and thinking through this right now?
A lot of anxiety, a lot of sleepless nights about thinking about the future she's walking into. And if I was recommending her to go into college, I don't think I don't even know if college is going to be a thing in 3 years. I'm going to be very serious with that. I think anything that has to do with IQ is over. It's already smarter than us. It's already better than us. The key is EQ. The key is critical thinking. The key is learning how to learn. So what I've told her is, I don't give a shit if you get an A in math, in science. I don't care. Honestly, I do not care. I think it's important that, shows you your effort in it and all that other stuff. What I care about is that you learn how to learn, right? Because critical thinking has gone away. We teach the test. The kids just memorize shit. My wife talks about it all the time. She has an insane memory. So she got through school pretty easy because she could just memorize whatever it was, take the test, and she was great at taking the test. I struggled. I had to figure this shit out. I had to like, oh, I wasn't that smart, so I had to really think about it and work through it. I think now I don't care about, okay, you memorized this thing, so you got an A on that test. I care about, how did you get to the answer? What was your thought process around that? If you got it wrong, do you know why you got it wrong? Neil deGrasse said something that really opened up my eyes to it. He said, the learning of calculus isn't the point. It's actually how you learn calculus. Because as you're learning calculus, it's rewiring your brain to think a certain way, to problem solve. And that wiring of your brain is going to help you in the future learn other things, figure other things out. So I think a lot of the EQ stuff, empathy, passion, curiosity, and probably one of the most proud things that has happened for me in a long time with her is, I'm always proud of her, obviously, but the thing that just stood out was, we got an email about a month ago from her school, unsolicited, and said, "Congratulations, Charlotte, you have gotten the distinct award for whatever in science. The reasoning is for your passion for the topic, your unfettered curiosity, your work ethic in getting things done." And there was a fourth one, I forget. I have it pinned up on the refrigerator. But they were like my four favorite characteristics. Passion. You can't teach passion.
Yeah.
You can't teach curiosity. You can't teach work ethic, right? So if we can instill those, I think a kid has a chance, right? Because adaptability is going to be the only skill that you can really apply moving forward, because it's going to change fast. I also think values. I don't think we as adults talk to kids enough about values and help, them figure out what their core values are and how to look at the world. Because I think once you center on that, and obviously a kid's values evolve, they don't know, but we talked about values early. And so she has this lens of how she looks through friends, relationships, schools, and that type of thing, that she can center on those values. And I always tell them, like, look, you're going to fail. But if you stay true to your values, then you'll be all right. You know what I mean? Yeah, you'll disappoint some people, whatever. And sometimes you'll break your values. And that's why it feels so bad when certain things happen. And so I think if you ground a kid with values, which those values lead to confidence. And I think with social media and all that stuff, there's no way you're going to protect your kid from social media. You can try to restrict, good luck. They'll figure out a way to get it. And you're never going to protect them from everything that's online, all the weirdos and predators and all that shit, or the mirror to their anxiety and whatever the FOMO and all that stuff is happening. So you're never going to protect them from that. So the only way you can, to me, is give them values and confidence, so that whatever they see, they'll be like, you know what, that's okay. And so if you start with values, builds confidence, and then you focus on like getting them engaged and getting them curious and those type of things, I think they have a chance. Because my concern right now, when we were growing up in sales and business, right? The first 5 years of our lives were just shit work. You know what I mean? Just like I'm knocking on doors, I'm writing shit down, I'm up there. I didn't even have a CRM back then. But what all that did was that gave me grit, that gave me confidence, that gave me insights and business acumen so I can be the sales professional that I am today. And I don't need a script. I don't need a checklist to go through. It's like I can have this conversation and be genuine with it, right? Now, all that entry level stuff and pick a job. I don't care, lawyers, doctors, all of it. All the entry level stuff can now be done way better by AI, way better. We used to accept it as a society that learning curve was there for the younger, right? Hey, okay, I got to talk to an SDR who kind of doesn't know what they're talking about, so I can get to the AE who still doesn't know what they're talking about, so I can get to the SE so I can have that conversation. Or like the lawyer that we worked with, because we didn't want to pay $700 an hour, we'll pay $150 an hour for some of the younger lawyers to go do some of the admin bullshit work and wait 2 weeks to get it to the real lawyer so we could have the real conversation, right? Hey, ChatGPT, can you, right? So now, if all the learning curve stuff is now done better, faster, more efficiently than any junior anything could ever do, the two questions I have that I'm struggling with and trying to figure out on my podcast on every conversation I have is A, where do the fundamentals come from? B, I think more interesting is what are the fundamentals anymore? And I don't know what the answer to that is. I think it's EQ. I think it's the curiosity, passion, engagement, those type of things. I think that's the fundamentals. I think we got to get back to learning how to connect with humans because that's going to be the only thing that's left.
So I agree. I think a lot of it is being able to have interpersonal skills, being able to work with people, being able to understand people. As I think about what AI can or can't do, because I think that's a really fundamental question. And not just today, right? Because we're talking about exponential growth of these things and getting better and better. And so it's hard even to comprehend it. But I don't know if you remember, there's a scene in Good Will Hunting when Robin Williams is trying to get through to Matt Damon. And the scene before had basically torn him a new one by telling him he saw this painting, he looked into his soul, and he reflected on it, and he sat down with him, and he's for about 6 hours. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't deal with what you said, but then I realized you're just a kid. And you haven't gone to war and seen your best friend die in your arms and all these things.
Sistine Chapel. You can't tell me what it
Yes,
smells like in the Sistine Chapel, right?
exactly. And at a fundamental level, I feel like AI is like, Will Hunt, right? That they will be able to quote every soliloquy, be able to give all the history of Michelangelo and everything, but at its essence, and it can fake it a little just like he could, but at its essence, something's missing. Just like a LinkedIn post where somebody's just like saying what they need to say, but there's always something fundamentally missing. There's a place where you just sense they're not human. They haven't had those life experiences. And I feel like that's where we have to really lean in because I think both for that EQ and relating, there's going to be something missing that fakes it, and people are already having a relationship with AI, and I get it, but there's something fundamentally missing there. And then also from a maybe more hopeful standpoint, because this would even be resistant to AI being able to perfectly fake it, is that hopefully there's both a backlash and there is a fundamental level where people do want to relate to people just like people don't want to buy a fake Van Gogh, just like you said, on those things that make us uniquely human and we can do. But where I'm a little pessimistic is unfortunately those are the skills that have gotten worse.
Everything's transactional now. Yeah, we've lost that skill. And you're right. I think there is almost always going to be just something off about the AI message. You know what I mean? I can sense it. I tell people this to this day. You give me 100 emails, 50 developed by AI and 50 developed by humans. I'll tell you which. I'll be 95% accurate. I almost guarantee it. The only way I can describe it is it doesn't have a soul. And that is a hopeful component to this, right? As a human, I want to talk to somebody, make myself feel like, yeah, that's assuming humans keep buying shit. When you flip that, what I'm more worried about, everybody talk about all these cadence tools and all these tools are going to take over sales. Bullshit. I don't care about any of that stuff. I care about when the buyer wakes up and realizes they don't need us, man. Because, and I'll give you a very specific example that just happened to me with my daughter. Let's take doctors. My daughter's 14. She's always had a little lactose intolerance, but funny, right? Just, oh, she's farting a little bit after she drinks, that type of stuff. Who cares? But 2 months ago, like it went from 0 to 60. Like her gut just turned on her, right? And it was awful. Anything she ate, she was in super big pain and she felt like she was going to throw up. And I was like, Jesus, what's happening? So we talked to doctors and we got tests and all this other stuff. And this, I don't know if you've been through doctors and shit. Like, it's mind numbing. Like, most of them talk over you. Like, you don't know, what do you mean? And I'm nervous. My daughter, I'm panicking, right? So I created a custom GPT, Charlotte's Gut Health GPT. I said, act as a GI specialist for a 14-year-old girl. I want you to be the best GI specialist in the world. I then took every blood test that she took and put it in there. I said, what does this mean? Here's some red and green and tell me what I should be looking for. I then every doctor appointment that we went on, I recorded and transcribed and put it into the GPT. We have a scale where she tracks all her food. And then we have the scale of 1 to 10 of like, how does she feel after she ate? So is it a 1, no problem at all? 10, I got to go to the hospital. So 4, 5, whatever. So I had her all document that, put that into the GPT. Every conversation I had with a friend, everybody's got stories about their kids and gut health and them. Oh, have you heard of this? And have you heard of that? And it's like, Jesus, I don't never heard of that before. Take that. Hey, have you ever heard of SIBO? Have you ever heard of, does anxiety make a difference yet? So then when I'm asking questions, what else should I be thinking about here? Tell me more, right? I'm not looking at it for the answer because I don't believe them. It's pulling off the internet. It can only be so accurate. I have critical thinking ability. I know where to call shit bullshit and not, but I also know I'm not the expert. But I don't necessarily know if I trust all the experts these days, especially doctors. My dad passed away, and my dad died from this weird virus, and if the doctor had been exposed to what that virus was, they would have figured it out immediately as soon as they saw him. But because of the doctors he went to, they had no idea what it was, and they didn't figure it out until he was on his deathbed. Too many people put so much trust in a doctor to tell them, okay, the doctor's one person with only a certain amount of knowledge. Like, we can only retain a certain amount of knowledge. So one of our visits was a nutritionist. I said, hey, ChatGPT, could you do me a favor? Print out a 2-page document that summarizes everything we've done so far. And I want you to make the document summary specific for what a nutritionist should know versus her GI specialist. Also, give me 10 questions I should be asking this nutritionist so that I can get some clarity on a plan moving forward with my daughter. We go to the appointment. I hand her the 2-page document. And I'm like, could you just read this, please? Because this gets rid of those. So tell me what's been going on. It's like, here, read this. She reads it. She's like, holy shit, this is incredible. This is great. Thanks for the update. I'm like, thank you. I know. So we got some questions. And I start going through these questions. And this woman, doctor, proceeded to talk in circles for about 30 to 40 minutes. And I didn't want to be rude because my daughter was sitting right there. I didn't want to just interrupt her and be like, what the fuck? But about 35, 40 minutes in, I go, I'm sorry, I need to stop. I'm actually more confused now than I was before I walked in the door here. My goal here was to come to you as the expert and ask some questions so we can get very specific advice on what we should be doing and have a game plan to address what's happening to my daughter right now. And I feel like there's a lot of maybes and possibilities and try and could and miss, that type of might. Are we going to get to a concrete plan to help my daughter here? And then she talked in circles for another 10 minutes. I said, thank you very much. We have a hard stop here at 3:00. Appreciate your insights. Thank you very much. See you later. I looked at my insurance. We have a high premium. So I paid $500 for that meeting. It took 3 hours out of my life, and it took 2 weeks to schedule. And I walked out of there dumber than I walked in. Now let's apply that to sales. I'm going to sit on the phone with an SDR, 22 years old, who doesn't know shit from shit, who's going to ask me a bunch of piece of shit bant questions. And if I'm interested in that conversation, I'm then going to have to wait another week to talk to an AE who's probably going to ask me the same questions and give me maybe a little bit more insight. And then I'm probably going to have to wait a week for an SE to get on the phone, who probably is the one I need to talk to, but is probably going to ask me the same fucking questions I asked that AE. Or I go into ChatGPT and I say, hey, ChatGPT, here's my 12 to 24-month business plan. I'm thinking of evaluating these type of vendors. Here's the solution I'm taking. Tell me what I need to know about this. What are the pros and cons? How does it compare against the top 3 other vendors in the state? What questions am I missing? Help me understand, da, 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 da. And by the time, so we've all heard that by the time somebody comes to us, they're already 60 to 70% of the way through the sales process. That stat has been way overused because to me, that's an inbound lead. Okay. It's an inbound lead. Yes, I've done my homework. I don't need to be sold. I need to be helped to buy. So backing me into your sales process, piss off. I used to say, let's stop it. Outbound's different. Now, if you ping me with one of your SDR emails that happens to hit me at a point where I'm like, that's interesting. And I do schedule a call because I want to talk to a sales rep. Well, 5 minutes before I get on that call, Tell me about this business. What should I need to know? What questions I should ask this rep? How are the pros and cons? In literally 5 minutes. Then I get on the phone and some 22-year-old kid who has no idea what they're talking about is going to try to add value to my life. I want to talk to an SE. I want to talk to a customer success. So that's the fear, is buyers doing what I did to that doctor. As a positive note, the GI specialist we went to, all the confidence of the world. I did the same thing, gave him the 2 pages. He looks at it. He goes, yep, this is legit. He goes, yeah, I get where you're going with these things, but those are going to be later. Here's the plan. We're going to start with the easy stuff first to knock those things off. And then if we have to do those type of tests for this, then we will. But let's start here. We have 6 weeks. We're going to do this. And I was like, oh my God, you are insanely valuable to me. But unfortunately, I think that's going to be about 10 to 20% of our population at best.
So let's break that down and what that means for organizations and people who are trying to organize their sales teams around this new dynamic. And because I think let's talk about the power of this. And let me also frame this with, you had a great LinkedIn post. There's a Microsoft report that came out with the professions that are going to be most likely replaced by AI in the near future. And so before I ask you this question, let me ground it in this. So I loved reading down it. So number one, I think we all would call interpreters and translators. Number two, historians. I don't know where that came. It seems, I mean,
I don't know how many historians there are, but yeah, there are a couple.
I know the two that are going to lose their job. Passenger attendants, which I'm not sure what those are either. But then number four, sales representatives of service, which sounds very fancy. I've never been called a sales representative of service. I kind of like that. But that is number four. So the highest, and basically they took different skill sets and things that these professions do and looked at the correlation between what they do and how well AI can replace them. So eventually, as these tools become more ubiquitous and they're, instead of Googling things, it's just, they're chat GPTing it, it's going to happen more and more. So I'm a sales leader who's trying to set up my organization around these buyer patterns. Um, I think on the flip side too, sales teams now have tools. We've been telling them you got to do pre-call research, you got to do research, you got to now. And they very few do it. Now it's at least a lot easier for them to do it, right? And get really good research and whatnot. So how do sales leaders look at this to try to maximize the tools that now are at their fingertips to allow their teams to do things that they never could get them to do before very easily and actually make it more fun, while trying to meet the buyers where they are, which, like you said, they're doing most of this research themselves. They're already annoyed by, division of labor. And so what's your perspective, I guess, both in the short term, and then we'll finish up here in the long term with where sales is going.
So I think we're in such a flux mode right now that it's evident to me that we're all living in a legacy model and we're transitioning right now and we just don't know what that future model is. I would look at my team, and my suggestion to organizations I work with is turn your sales org into a sales lab. Analyze your sales process. I remember when I was Thrive Networks, my first company, and I had reps, and I'd be like, I need you to be more strategic, right? Like, John, I'm not a strategic thinker. I'm like, let me demystify strategic thinking for you, okay? All strategic thinking is outlining a process, right? And then figuring out the weakest link of that process, picking that piece out, figuring out a solution for it, plugging it back in and seeing how it works, and then just iterating and iterating. Like, that's strategic thinking at the end of the day, in my opinion. Every rep right now is playing around. He's either scared shitless of AI that we're all looking over our shoulders going, when is this stuff going to replace us? Some are diving into it. Some are avoiding it. Some are, wasting a lot of time with it. So it's happening within these organizations, whether you like it or not. And the days of top-down decision-making of tools these days, I think ridiculous, because think about AI for a second. If you determine as an executive that, okay, I'm going to look at this, let me evaluate, here's the problem that we have. Let me evaluate some solutions here. Then let me implement that solution. Then we onboard everybody with it. You're 6 to 9 months out at best of implementing any systemic AI solution, right? Or technology at this point. Can you genuinely look at me in the eyes, David, and say in the next, what the world's going to look like in 9 months? I have no fucking idea. So my point is like, I think that's over. And you don't get buy-in from the org. You get reps who are just there just to get a job and get paid, and who cares, and get in and out. We gotta start working together better as teams here at this point. So my solution is turn your sales into a sales lab, and sales org into a sales lab. Pick Friday afternoons, 2 hours every Friday afternoon. Get everybody
Hmm.
together, Zoom, whatever, it doesn't matter. and break up into groups. So you put like senior reps with junior reps. So you got the business acumen, you got the tech savvy. You put some SEs in there because they're really good with prompting and code, right? That type of. You put some marketers in there because they got some messaging and stuff like that, right? So you put a team of 5 or 6 reps that are very diverse within the organization, right? And it's kind of like how engineers have hackathons, right, where they pick something and they nerd out on it for a little while and see if they can fix it. I think we should do the same thing in sales. You outline your sales process and you figure out, where are we falling down the most? Is it meeting prep? Is it follow-ups? Is it updating CRM? Is it whatever? What is it? You frame the problem and then you give some guidelines on what you're looking for everybody to figure out. And then you let every team use AI, whatever it is, to figure out a way to better address that problem. Give them an hour, whatever it is. And then at the end of that hour, everybody has to present what they came up with. And then the team votes. Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Winner, gift cards, whatever the hell you want to do. And then you apply that immediately the next week. So now we learn together, we pick something. Ideally, we find something that's a solution for us. So now you got buy-in from your organization because the team is doing it. You'll probably reduce your tech stack because there's a ton of free stuff out there right now that you can do with AI without having to try too hard. And you're going to improve employee satisfaction, business acumen, and all that fun stuff if you do it right. And you just do that every single week. That way you evolve, and any new thing, you're just like, hey guys, this new thing came out. Let's all beat it up for another hour here, see what people can figure out on it. Cool. Next week, next week, next week. That to me creates business acumen, employee satisfaction, growth, agility, all of it. And you don't need training. You can be your own training org as if you do this the right way.
Yeah, I love that. Another principle from tech folks is like the Google 10% time, and give people, for the next, 6 months, 10% of time just to play.
Yeah. So that's exactly it. Just get play because they're doing it anyway. So control it, give it some structure, and then have some have some outputs that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that, tying it to also the kids stuff here, my thinking is, like you said, we don't know what it's going to be like in 6 months, let alone 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But the key thing is, just we know it's going to be there, and so we got to lean in. Every major change that has happened, whether it's industrial revolution, internet, people were scared about all jobs going away. We're going to have nothing to do. And a few things I think are always true. One is that we didn't necessarily see a lot of these types of things coming. We don't know what the iteration is, right? You need the internet, you need the iPhone, you need the App Store, and then you need somebody to start Uber, right? So there's like 5 iterations of things that might change, and we just don't know what those are. We just know that it's going to change, and it's going to change a lot faster than any of these other things, which is the scariest part. Like, society is just not ready for how quickly this is going to change. But then the other Uber thing is, I hope, again, that humans want to be productive for the most part, right? And they want to have meaning, and they want to have meaningful careers. And so hopefully we will create that, even if it isn't an incarnation of what it was when we were growing up, it is now. And so with that, John, what is your perspective for sales and whatnot over the next few years? Where are you landing here?
I think sales is everything, right? I mean, I think it's a human skill, the relationships and working with people. So I think people are always going to need help making decisions, right? So therefore, if you look at sales as, helping people solve problems or achieve goals, then I think sales is always going to be relevant, right? If you look at it as, I'm an SDR and I'm making cold calls and I need to send out cadences, quite frankly, I don't think that's sales. That I don't mean to offend any SDRs out there, but I just don't think that's sales. That's just hammering out sequences and cadences. The ones who are maybe doing some research, having good conversations, okay. But if you think of me walking you through BANT and Medic, and then giving you a presentation, and then droning through a demo is sales, then no, I think that's all irrelevant. I think if it's helping people put context around what's happening, helping people make decisions, asking questions that the AI, based on my having the experience to smell what it's like at the Sistine Chapel, I think that's there. But the challenge is that we're lazy as humans. We're lazy. And the problem is we've gone from a search engine to an answer engine. We can all argue that Google fed us whatever it felt like feeding us anyways, right? So it didn't matter, but at least there was a perception of choice. At least I had to kind of look through a couple of links and, read an article or two and be like, yeah, that's my truth. I believe that, and I'll use that as context. Well, now it's just, it gives you the answer. And inherently, it can't be right. I think the number one source of content on AI is Reddit. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it's pulling from. So, so inherently, it can't be right all the time, or even a lot of the time. And again, for people like you and I, who have context, who have interests, who are curious, who are, who kind of question, like, I don't know about that. Tell me more. Give me the different perspective on this. Ask me 10 questions so that you know exactly what I'm trying to get at here. It is a superpower. And I think that that's going to be relevant for a long time ahead. But for the vast majority of people who are lazy, they're going to ask ChatGPT for the answer. They're going to take that answer, copy it, and paste it. And in that sense, I have no idea what the use of that human is. I just don't. So my vision for the future for sales reps is Iron Man, Iron Woman. Because if you think of Tony Stark, right, as a human, he had it all. He's good looking, he's rich, he's super smart, right? Jerk, anyways. But if he tried to fight all those aliens, right, he'd get killed. So what does he have to do? He has to create the suit. But the suit, that first suit, right, was like all clunky and, broke up in the desert. He didn't really become Iron Man until he introduced Jarvis, the AI. So now you have the human, the suit, and AI, and you can whoop some ass. So that's why I think the future is the ones who dive into this head first. As much as I can argue that it's horrifying because of the environmental impact and all, we're all headed towards, extinction and all that other stuff. I don't think we have a choice right now. You either unplug completely and just go live on a beach in Costa Rica, which is where I'm headed, or you dive into this shit and you learn everything about it, because it is the biggest superpower you could ever imagine if you learn how to use it. And for those of us who learn how to use it, we can educate others on how to use it. I actually think it's easier now to add value to somebody's life more than ever before. Because if I wanted to prospect to you, for instance, like we always say, add value. How do you add value to somebody, right? Well, hey, ChatGPT, I'm meeting with this person. This is what their persona is. This is what their role. This is their company. Give me 5 ideas of valuable content or insights that I can bring to that person and share with them on an email. I like those. Oh, deep research. Could you go do a deep research project for me on that topic and give me a 3-page white paper on that topic specific to David so I can send it to him? Hey, David, I've been paying attention to your business for a little while now. And actually, people like you that we've worked with in the past have challenges. And I'm not sure if you're seeing these, but I actually had ChatGPT do some research for you on how you might be able to strategize from a business standpoint. Thought you might get some value out of that. Like, and most people aren't there yet. They think it's funny. They think it's like Google, but it's a funny Google, right? And that's everything. I'm like, holy shit, you have no idea what's coming. And so I think for those of us that are those not bleeding edge, I think bleeding edge is already out there, right? The leading edge ones that are willing to try, willing to put in the work, right? And have that work ethic, have that curiosity, have that passion. I think the world is going to be I think you're going to be able to make so much money and make such a difference in this world. But for everybody else who's looking to automate what they're doing with AI, that's why I say augmentation, not automation. If you are looking to automate with AI, I think it's a fool's errand. If you are looking to augment, right, your superpower.
Well, that is actually a fairly optimistic way to end this, John. So,
For those of us who care, this is where I'm at. I am insanely optimistic, at least here for the short to midterm, and maybe like within the next 5 years. For those of us who are willing to put in the work and who are curious and are and have that interest, right? I'm insanely pessimistic for everybody who isn't.
all right. Well, John, this has been a fantastic conversation. Folks who don't know how to find you, tell them where to go.
Yeah, website's the easiest, jbarrows.com, so letter JRROWS.com. That's where you can I get my free YouTube channels, all my content's on there. LinkedIn, obviously, you can hit me up there. Unfortunately, I can't accept any more connections there. I've hit the limit. And then, Instagram handles John M. Barrows. And right now, I just launched, so if anybody's interested, I do training and you can get all my content right on my website. But I'm doing, for the first time, one-on-one engagements. So 3 months, it's called my elite program. And so I'm not trying to do 50 people, right? I'm probably 5 to 10, where I work with them on a one-on-one basis, over the course of 3 months on not just sales, but life shit, values, those type of things that we talked about. And so if anybody out there is looking for some one-on-one coaching, you can hit me up and we'll have a conversation, see where it goes.
That's great. Well, John, thanks again for taking the time to chat with me.
Yeah.